students, welcome to today's session. In today's session, we will be concentrating on one of the most important aspects of web programming, that is connecting to databases. Whenever you browse different websites, you always see that you are requested to enter some data and again you will get some response from the server side. Basically, how is it happening? What are the requirements to develop such websites? One requirement is that at the back end you need to have a database, and in the front end it is the HTML which is interfacing with you, and whenever you send data, the data is received by the server will be communicating with the database can be part of that particular server, or the database may be mounted on a different server which may be called a database server. So, once it communicates with the database and receives the information, it will be sending it back to the browser. So, in this way, wherever there is interactivity on a website, you should expect that there is a database at the back end. Now, how to develop software where the websites can be designed in such a way that there can be a database at the back end and you can do programming in the front end, so that it connects to the back end and gets the information. There are different ways of doing it. The first thing is, what is the technology you are using? Are you using a Java technology, are you using Microsoft technology, or anything else? In today's session, we will be concentrating on how to develop programs and connect to databases at the back end from the front end with Java technology. This is called as Java Database Connectivity, short form is JDBC. What is JDBC? That is the first question. JDBC means Java Database Connectivity. Whenever you develop Java applications, and in case these applications have to contact the server and give information back to the application, then you need to have a database at the back end and a JDBC driver on your machine. Where the JDBC machine is resident, it depends on the particular application and the paradigm you are using. So, let us see exactly what is meant by JDBC. JDBC is a standard that enables Java applications to connect to databases that support SQL. If you see this particular sentence, the most important word is enabling. Enabling is different from supporting. Supporting means you can write a program which can be executed by that particular language, but in this case enabling means it itself provides you that facility. So, enabling is greater than supporting. So, JDBC is nothing but it is a standard that enables Java applications to connect to SQL databases. What do you mean by SQL database? For example, you have a number of databases like FoxPro, DBase, Oracle, Informix, Ingress, Microsoft SQL Server, Microsoft Access. Now, whenever you develop a Java application and whenever you are using JDBC to connect to the database, you should keep in mind that the database should support SQL. The reason is, in case it does not support SQL, you cannot develop an application in Java using JDBC to fetch the data from that particular database in general. You may be able to write a program which can connect to the database and get the data back to the application, but at the same time, in case you change the database, your application may crash. The simple reason is SQL is a standard for the databases, which is called a structured query language. As long as a database supports SQL, the JDBC which is being used by the Java application to connect the database will be working. So, it does not matter whether you are using a Microsoft Access database or an Informix database or a SQL Server database or an Access database. So, in few words, JDBC is a standard. Database independent, as I just reminded to you, it does not matter whether the backend is an SQL Server, backend is an Access or Informix or anything else, as long as that particular database management system supports SQL. And one more reason why JDBC is platform independent is that it is dependent on Java and Java is platform independent. Since Java is platform independent, Java database connectivity package is also platform independent, due to which whenever you develop a Java application and using JDBC to connect to the database, then it becomes database independent. So, Java language is platform independent and JDBC is database independent. Use any database at the back end, your program will work as long as that database supports SQL. JDBC is also a package of Java. You have a number of packages in Java. One is IO package, util package, a number of packages, and JDBC is one of such packages and it forms part of SQL. So, java.sql.star means all the classes that are part of SQL will be included in your application, and whenever you say JDBC, it is nothing but all the classes whatever are mentioned in the package SQL or forms are also part of JDBC. The another famous database connectivity standard is ODBC. ODBC is useful whenever you are working on Microsoft technologies. You have a database backend which is from Microsoft, you have a front end which is from Microsoft or Microsoft supports it, then you will be using ODBC. And the expansion for ODBC is Open Database Connectivity. It is also a standard, but at the same time, since this is also a famous standard, let us see what are the differences between ODBC and JDBC. The first thing is ODBC is a C language standard. ODBC is based on C language. C language is not portable, it is platform dependent. So, ODBC is also platform dependent, and JDBC is a standard of Java language. Since Java is platform independent, JDBC is database independent. So, ODBC is database dependent, JDBC is database independent. Another difference is ODBC is a collection of functions. Why we are calling it as a collection of functions? The simple reason is ODBC is based on C language, and C language is a procedural language. It is not an object oriented programming language, due to which whatever you write using ODBC or whatever is based on the C language, they are nothing but they are collection of functions, and any C language program, in case it needs to be executed, it contains at least one main function. So, obviously, any C language program is a collection of functions. In this case also ODBC is a collection of functions. JDBC is a set of classes. Java is a pure object oriented programming language. So, there is no scope for functions. You have member functions, but they are not exclusively self contained functions. Due to this, since Java is an object oriented programming language, JDBC is a collection of classes. That is why we term ODBC is a collection of functions and JDBC as a collection of classes. The next step is ODBC is not database independent, it just means that it is database dependent. Whenever you develop an application using ODBC, be sure that you are not going to change the database backend in the future. In case you need to change the backend in the future, you need to change your application also, and also you need to think of the operating system you are using, what are the other utilities you are using, because ODBC is dependent on all these things. At the same time, since JDBC is dependent on Java, and since Java is platform independent, you can use it on any operating system and also with any database. Today, when you are developing software, maybe SQL Server is your backend, and in future the customer may change the database backend. He may go for MS Access, he may go for Oracle, he may go for Informix, or he may go for Ingress. Then you need not change your application, the application remains as it is, and your software will run as if there is an SQL server at the backend as it is present when you are developing software initially. So, one thing which we have to keep in mind is, as long as a database at the backend is static, you can go for ODBC or JDBC. But at the same time, in case you think that in future the database backend may be changed, to cut down the costs on developing applications, you have to go for JDBC, because it is database independent, and since Java is platform independent. ODBC and JDBC both are based on X by Open SQL call level interface. Basically, X by Open SQL CLI is nothing but it is a standard, and both are built on this standard. That is the reason there is a possibility wherein you can use both JDBC and ODBC to connect to a database. How you can use it, we will be seeing in the coming up slides. This is the basic reason why JDBC and ODBC can be combined. And one more important thing is that since they are based on a common standard, we can also work with them together. What are the different ways of using JDBC? Since JDBC is a standard, since it is used to connect to databases, it is also important that there are a number of ways of connecting to databases. It depends on what architecture your software is going to be. Suppose that you are already going to think of connecting to databases in a software that is already existent. You have to think of what is the architecture it is based on. Is it a 2-tier architecture? Is it a 3-tier architecture? Is it using ODBC, or it's that you have to build application from the scratch? It depends on all these issues whether you want to use JDBC in one way or the other. The first way of using JDBC is JDBC ODBC bridge. In this particular standard, what happens is you have a language, you have a backend. To be more specific, I would like to say you have a front end, you have a back end, and from front end you are trying to connect to the back end. Front end is a language which is supported by Microsoft, back end is also a language database which is supported by the Microsoft. That is why you have decided to use ODBC to connect from the front end to the back end. That is the situation. Now, with the advent of JDBC, with the advent of platform independence, and with the popularity of internet based applications, you need to change all your PC based applications onto the internet. When you are porting your applications onto the internet, as you know, internet is nothing but, though it is not an exact definition, it is a network of a number of machines on which no specific software is present. On some machines there may be Windows, on some machines there might be Unix, on some other machines you might be having Solaris. But the most important thing is any website can be viewed by any person. It just means that the website that is designed is platform independent. Now, suppose that you put the same software with some modifications onto the website, then only those people can see who are using Microsoft technologies. And in case I am using a different operating system than Windows, I cannot use your software, I cannot see your website. Then how do I cater to the needs of the customers? The only way is move to a platform which is independent of a specific operating system. Today you have only Java, which is platform independent. That is why you need to move to Java to develop applications which are internet based, so that they can cater to every customer. Then what about the investment? You have already placed in the Microsoft, you have already used ODBC. Now, how to move to the Java based technology? Is it that you have to just scrap the entire application and start it once again, and you need to use Java and JDBC? No, you already have a database structure, you already have an RDBMS existent, you already have a front end, and there is ODBC in the middle communicating from front end to the back end. Now, you have to just put JDBC which will connect to the ODBC. It is nothing but it is called JDBC ODBC bridge. Basically, what happens is your application will be making calls to the JDBC. It does not know that there is ODBC and other Microsoft based technology at the back end. So, for you it is a JDBC driver existent, and your program is making calls to the JDBC. Yes, you need to make some modifications to your front end application, so that the calls to the ODBC are substituted by the JDBC. And one important thing is, without making any modifications, it is not possible to move from one paradigm to other paradigm. Here you are moving from a PC based paradigm to internet based paradigm. So, once you are with you are done with all the modifications and placed the JDBC calls, your software will be making calls to the JDBC driver. Now, what JDBC driver will do? JDBC driver will take each of your calls, will convert them into equivalent ODBC calls, and will be placing them to the ODBC for serving. So, it is just like that. Make a Java call from your front end Java application, it goes to the JDBC. JDBC will do the needful, so that that particular call is presented to the ODBC in a way that ODBC understands it. Once ODBC receives it, it will be communicating with the server and getting the data. In case database is present in the server, it will get from the server. In case if it is not the case, the server will be communicating to the database server. So, let us just forget it. Let us just think that there is only a client and a server, and you need to get data directly from the server. So, client to JDBC, JDBC will convert the call and place them onto the ODBC, and ODBC will be communicating the same to the server, and the server will be communicating the data to the ODBC, which in turn goes to the JDBC and in turn goes to the front end. So, here in the middle you are not using only JDBC, not using only ODBC, but you are using a combination of the both JDBC, ODBC. That is why we call it as a JDBC ODBC bridge. You just imagine about a bridge connecting two shores. It can be one bridge which may be exclusively JDBC or ODBC, or it may be a combination of two bridges in a sequence where first is JDBC, then ODBC, and when you are coming from the other way, it is first ODBC, then JDBC. That is what is called as JDBC ODBC bridge, and this concept is widely used in applications that have been already developed previously, but now being moved to the internet. The other way is native Java driver. Native means, I have to say, it is just home. Java driver in your front end itself. It just means that suppose that I have gone to a particular website, and once I have gone there, it is an interactive application and an applet is downloaded onto my machine. Once the applet is downloaded, along with the applet, even the Java driver is downloaded. Whenever I say Java driver, it is nothing but it is JDBC driver. So, JDBC driver is also downloaded onto my machine. Once it is downloaded, from the applet, I can connect to the database at the backend on the server, and for that whatever is the driver that is supported by that database, which is already downloaded along with the applet, will be used. So, I cannot use another JDBC driver to connect to that particular database. That is why I say that as a native Java driver. It is within the front end. That is why we call it as a native Java driver. If it is not part of the front end, then you have independence to use any driver, then it is no more native. Native Java driver means a driver which comes bundled with the front end. That front end may be an applet which is downloaded from the server through a website into a browser. That is what do you mean by native Java driver. Three-tiered JDBC remote invocation access. In this case, basically this is the method which is used in most of the industry based applications. In an industry based application, you have terabytes of data. You cannot just go for a Microsoft Access or a some model Java database at the back end. You need to have a professional database server at the back end, which can serve terabytes of data to the clients through the server whenever there is a request. In three-tier architecture, what happens is you have a client, you have a server which is called as operating system server, and then you have a database server. So, there are a total of 3 components. I will be showing the pictorial form of this particular one in the coming up slides. In this case, what happens is the client contacts the operating system server, the operating system server will be going through that particular request, and in case there is need for any database related information, it will be contacting the database server also. So, here in the picture you have one front end, 2 backends, and both are servers. One is operating system server and the other is database server. So, here you have 3 components: front end, operating system server which is called a backend, and then a database server which is called a database server itself, because it is not visible to the client. It is totally visible only to the operating system server. Since there are 3 components, and since all essential communications which are related to database will be going through all the 3 components, we call it as a 3-tier architecture. In 3-tier architecture, JDBC will be using what is called remote method invocation, RMI, that we will be seeing in detail in the coming up slides. And finally, lightweight Java or JDBC clients. A lightweight Java or JDBC client is nothing but you will be getting some software which you need not essentially download from the website. but at the same time whenever you buy some software, you are given that particular piece of software along with a driver embedded in it. That is called lightweight Java driver, and using that driver you can connect to the vendor's website or whatever is the database with which you need to be in touch to run your application successfully. This is called lightweight Java or JDBC client because it is bundled within the client. There is some commonality between the lightweight Java JDBC client and native Java driver, and the commonality is that in native Java driver we download it from the website. Your driver is part of applet. Whenever you want to connect to the backend, you use the applet. The applet will be using the JDBC driver downloaded, and it will be connecting to the server and gets the information. But in the case of lightweight Java or JDBC clients, your client is fixed. You are given that particular driver when you purchase that particular client. So, whenever you are trying to contact the backend, that particular driver will be used. In the case of native Java driver, the driver can change. For example, next time you go to the website and again applet is downloaded, but it is not essential that the same driver is existent because the vendor might have changed it. But here that is not the case. The client is yours, it will be with you, and whenever you are connecting to the backend, whatever software has been given into the client, the same will be used to connect to the backend and get the information from the database. So, there are totally 4 different ways of using JDBC. How you will be executing the SQL statements with JDBC? We will be going in detail, like I will be showing you at least 3 programs in this session, which will be demonstrating the usage of JDBC. As you know, always you have a raw way of connecting to the backend, but at the same time as you become more professional, the same thing can be done in a more polished way, so that the execution time is less, the errors may be less, and the maintenance cost may be less, and your software may be selling like a hot cake. But at the same time, let us start from the basics. What are the SQL statements that are needed with JDBC to connect to a backend database? First step is load a JDBC driver. As you know, every device is having a driver associated with it. Your keyboard is having a driver, your monitor is having a driver, your floppy disk drive is having a driver, and your printer is also having a driver. Every device is having a software which drives that particular device. Without driver, the device does not move. You can take it directly to a real life situation. You have a number of devices like flights, trains, buses, cars, whatever it is, but at the same time everything needs a driver. Without driver, it can't move. The same is the case with computer devices also. Monitor, you have a driver, keyboard, you have a driver, floppy disk drive, you have a driver. And in this particular case, where a device is not particularly visible, but at the same time you have a database backend which is visible, even in that case you need a driver to connect from the front end to the backend, because information has to be carried from the front end to the backend. For that you need a driver. And what is the driver you are using? It depends. It can be a JDBC driver, it can be ODBC driver, or it can be any other vendor's driver. But in this case, since we are concentrating on the JDBC, you make sure that you load the JDBC driver before you try to connect to a database at the backend. That is first step. The second step is, okay, now I loaded the driver. After loading it, the driver should know the way to reach the destination. That is what is meant by establishing a connection. I have a client, I have a server, and first of all I need to be sure of the route from the client to the server, so that in future I can execute a lot of instructions which keep on communicating from the client to the server and get the information processed. So, the first step is load the driver, the second step is create a connection to the database from the driver. So, the most important, these are elementary steps, like they are basic steps and they are common to any JDBC application irrespective of the technique you use to connect to the backend. create a SQL statement. If you remember, during the first slide itself I told you that you need to be sure that your database is compatible with SQL. In case it is not compatible, you will be facing problems, because the database independence feature of JDBC is disturbed. But in this case, I am saying create a SQL statement assuming that the database supports SQL. What is meant by creation of a SQL statement? Now, how you will get information from the database, from the client? It can be a select statement where you get data items from the database. It can be an insert statement where you are placing some information into the database. It can be an update statement where you are changing information on the database, or it might be a create table statement where altogether you are creating a new table which is empty initially, but at the same time you will be placing some data items in it. So, basic thing is, yes, there is an SQL statement irrespective of the functionality you perform from the client to the database or backend. That is why you need to create an SQL statement, and that SQL statement depends. It can be a select statement, insert, update, create, or anything else, or even delete if the permissions are given. Execute the SQL statement and return the results. After creation of SQL statement, you have to run that SQL statement. Once the SQL statement is run, that particular run output, I mean that if it is a select statement, the select statement will be performed on the database backend, and whatever data is retrieved from the database backend will be placed in what is called a result set. A result set is Java's terminology, and you can transfer whatever is output from the database to your own variables. But from the Java terminology and mechanically what happens is, once you execute the SQL query, the results are available in the result set. That is what we said here, execute the SQL statement and return the results. So, here you have 4 steps which are basic to any JDBC application. Load the JDBC driver, create a connection to the database from the driver, create SQL statement, execute the SQL statement and return results. Now, let us see how to translate each of these steps into Java specific steps. Load a JDBC driver, it is a purely English language and it can't be understood by the Java software. But when you translate it into Java, what is that which should exist in its place in any program that connects to the database using JDBC. First thing is java.sql.driver manager. Driver manager is a class in the SQL package of Java. Using this driver manager, you will be loading the appropriate JDBC driver, because it is not necessarily a JDBC ODBC bridge always, it depends on the application. But at the same time, whenever you are loading a driver, you have to use the interface java.sql.driver manager. Driver manager is an interface